One of the problems with Superman is, and I'm sure you guys have probably covered this, is the minute you start writing a Superman story or an anthology of Superman stories, you have a powers race that happens. You cannot have every issue be Superman stops a bank robbery, Superman rescues a kidnapped kid or beats up a thug. That's just not going to do it. So then the villains get more powerful. Superman has to get more powerful. And you reach a point where Superman is juggling planets and there are no stories. It's just completely over the top and ridiculous.
Welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike Folson.
Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you.
It's great to be here today. We've got a guy on that I've been trying to get on this podcast for a while, and it just never came up as like this is the right topic. But today we are talking about a perfect topic to have Frank Hernandez on for.
By trying to get me on, it means he asked me. I said yes.
Frank, you and I have known each other for goddamn like 15 years now, off and on from creative projects.
Okay, I'll give you $15 to never say that again. How's that?
I mean, we're all getting old here. It's fine. But fair enough. We've known each other for some time, we'll say.
Some time, yes.
Sometime. But mostly through working on sci-fi projects, Star Trek fan films, those kind of things. We're working together right now on Farragut Forward, which we've got an Indiegogo running for to try to actually make a movie-era Star Trek fan film.
That's right. Wrath of Khan era with the Monster Maroons. So
yeah, the Monster Maroons, man.
Isn't that something to check out?
Weirdly, despite the fact that we've both been aware that we're both giant Superman nerds, we've never really been able to sit down and just talk Superman stuff, because despite you currently wearing a Superman shirt and me currently wearing a Superman shirt and our Facebook profiles having tons of Superman stuff, usually we're talking Star Trek because we're talking work.
Right. We're working on something.
Yeah. But today we are talking about the greatest Superman story of its era until it wasn't. Today we are talking about the definitive origin of Superman until it wasn't. Today we are talking about the 1980 relaunch of the Superman franchise post-Crisis. We're talking about The Man of Steel by John Byrne.
That's right. Man of Steel. And I collected this when it was originally released in 1986 because I was collecting at the time. And it was just post-Crisis. They were looking to reboot and regenerate the entire thing. And what I think Byrne was trying to do with this was the popularity of the X-Men was really driving the comics industry at that time. And what he wanted to do was bring that matter-of-fact style of art and storytelling into the post-Crisis universe. And I think that's what this was about. And also, he wanted to tell the story in a manner as if it had just been written in 1986. So it would be accessible to the younger fans of that time. One of the problems with Superman is, and I'm sure you guys have probably covered this, is the minute you start writing a Superman story or an anthology of Superman stories, you have a powers race that happens. You cannot have every issue be Superman stops a bank robbery, Superman rescues a kidnapped kid or beats up a thug. That's just not going to do it. So then the villains get more powerful. Superman has to get more powerful. And you reach a point where Superman is juggling planets and there are no stories. It's just completely over the top and ridiculous. And I think they wanted to bring it back to its roots and say, well, if we were going to write this story today and we were writing it for the first time, if I had this idea, what would it look like? And then let it develop from there. And the threads of this, you can see all the way up into the Man of Steel, the movie. Mm-hmm. The threads of this still resound like the ringing of a great bell in the past. The notes still come through in certain iterations when in the new stories and in the new versions of it. And Henry Cavill's Superman.
Well, I mean, like this set the tone for what's considered post-Crisis Superman. So Superman from the late 80s through the 90s through most of the 2000s up until we get to New 52. So the basis of what we consider Superman stories during that entire era starts here, and we get a level of power and a level of a set of character circumstances here that become like the status quo. I mean, the animated series famously has very similar elements, like from Ma and Pa Kent being alive and the power levels and so forth. The Ruby Spears cartoon from the 80s also is going off of this as like the status quo. Like you said, Man of Steel, the movie, like certainly is borrowing elements from this. Like
definitely the post-singularity environment, the high-tech environment, all the babies being genetically engineered and born in little pods. And then they decide, you know what? We're going to actually have a baby. Because Russell Crowe.
My space dad.
And you can see elements of that in the current CW shows too. Like one of the big plot points, this is a minor spoiler, but a big plot point for Superman and Lois is the difference between a natural born versus a genetically engineered child of Krypton, and how they're like Clark Kal-El is a natural born son of Jor-El and Lara. Like that's a plot point there, and how that there are other Kryptonians who just never had that familial connection and are disconnected as a result. That really starts here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, if you go back, again, I'm giving away my age. If you go back to the original stories, I mean the original run of Superman.
Oh, back when you were collecting Action Comics #1 in 1938?
Yeah. Superman was from a planet of Superman. Like everybody could fly. And it was just completely out in left field. And for some reason the planet blows up. I mean, they don't even really, for some reason he escaped. So it had to be reinvented. It had to be redesigned. The crisis gave them the perfect opportunity to do that. And I think they wanted to take advantage of that. And again, bring it back to something that would be accessible to the younger readers of that time who were reading X-Men, who were, huge Wolverine fans and things like that that were going on in comics at the time. And they wanted to use that style of art and that style of storytelling. And I think they did a terrific job in this. It's only 6 issues.
Well, in terms of that style of art and that style of storytelling, like they literally did it. They've got John Byrne, who is most famous for, but prior to this, like he's worked on a bunch of stuff, but like 2 big runs come to mind before you get to this era, which is his X-Men run with Chris Claremont. Like he did the Dark Phoenix saga. He's a big part of why X-Men was big, why Wolverine was a big character.
Which was a renaissance at the time in comics. Mm-hmm. I mean, comics went through the roof at that.
Yeah, Byrne claims responsibility for why Wolverine and not Thunderbird died. He hadn't come on the book yet, but I believe he was in talks with them for coming on. And because Wolverine is Canadian, he claims that he was like, no, let's keep the Canadian one. Because the idea was that Thunderbird and Wolverine were both like these sort of animalistic kind of superheroes on the same team. And they're like, oh, it's too much. And he was like, no, I like the guy, that one. And honestly, probably just John Byrne talking shit. But... sure. Okay, cool. You can't say that he wasn't responsible for Wolverine having some of his cachet, because certainly a lot of the big moments came from Byrne. So we've got that X-Men run, which is huge, and we've got some cool stuff going on there. And then he went over and he did the Fantastic Four run, which he wrote and drew.
That's right. Which, again, that was a total renaissance.
Yeah, amazing.
Renaissance at the time. People who had never collected Fantastic Four were like, I have to have this.
Yeah, honestly, if you have never gotten into the Fantastic Four, the Byrne era is not a bad era to jump in and be introduced to all the crazy stuff. Because Byrne is a great artist. Like, whatever else you're going to say about him, whatever kind of shitbag who would light an effigy of his boss at a party that everyone was at as sort of his way of saying fuck you to Jim Shooter.
Wait, what?
Oh, yeah. No, John Byrne is a douchebag.
I need you to explain that.
Oh, yeah. Now, you could argue part of this is that Jim Shooter's also a douchebag, but John Byrne's a douchebag. I'm not going to mince words on that part. But he's talented. Also not going to lie about that part. But yeah, apparently there was this party that all the Marvel writers and editors got to at John Byrne's place, like in like Westchester, and they all went up for a weekend, and they had a straw figure of Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief of Marvel at the time, that they burned just to make fun of their boss because they all thought he was an asshole.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Anyway, so John Byrne left Marvel for reasons. Who can say what reasons there were, but he left Marvel about that time and headed over to DC, and DC was doing their revision of their continuity in general. They thought that, hey, the multiverse is too complicated. People are having a hard time understanding how you can have Earth 2 Superman who's married to Lois, and Earth 1 Superman who's in an on-again, off-again relationship with Lois, and also sometimes Lana Lang. And you can have Power Girl, who's the Earth 2 version of Supergirl, and also regular Supergirl. And you can have all the crazy stuff. And we've talked about the Crisis a few times. We talked about whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which was the finale of that Superman story. Like, after the Crisis occurred, that was the send-off to that character, the Superman who had been a member of the Legion of Superheroes.
Right, who had been Superboy and so on. Exactly.
Right, yeah, who had Krypto, who had all the different Kryptonites, who had Bizarros, who had, this whole pantheon of things, who had a future descendant of Jimmy Olsen who came back in time with an anti-gravity device so she could be Superwoman. Like, that Superman, they didn't want to deal with anymore. There was a lot of baggage.
Well, it's what I said. You end up in an arms race.
Yeah.
With powers, right? So now you got to have a guy who has a kryptonite heart, and then you've got to have the guy who's an alien who's as strong as Superman, or even stronger. And the arms race keeps escalating. And different writers come in and they start giving Superman new powers, or his powers get expanded and they become more powerful. And you reach that point in the late 70s where he's basically juggling planets. He's completely invincible. It's ridiculous.
Not basically, like actually.
Actually.
And they tried to do power downs. They did stories where like his powers were diminished or halved, and they kept on being like, well, what's half of infinite?
Right, exactly.
Infinite.
Also, right. Math, people, math. But the point is, what kind of story can you tell with a character like that? Here's our character. He has no character flaws, and he has infinite power. And what's your story? Well, I don't know. What are you going to do with it? There's no room for character growth. There's no room for storytelling. He's always going to win, and it's he might as well just be Zeus, just be God. Period.
Yeah,
you have to have something. You have to have something to risk, and you have to have something that's interesting for the reader. And this was a big deal at the time. It had become inaccessible to these kids. I wasn't a child in 1986, but the kids of the time, they didn't find the Superman of that era of I guess what was it, 1984, accessible at all. It was like, well, that's my dad's comics. I'm over here with the cool X-Men comics. This is what my Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and Superman and the Batman are the world's finest. That's what my dad read or whatever. It wasn't, the sales numbers will back me up on this. It wasn't what they were interested in. And they wanted to do what they did here. They wanted to reinvent it, tell the story as if it was fresh, new, and make it accessible. In the same way that as you're exposed to more and more music, your musical taste evolves. The things that you found enjoyable at a young age become simple and trite because your musical taste evolves and things become more accessible to you. The same thing happens with this kind of art and this kind of storytelling, and the older guys like me were like, well, what about the Legion of Superheroes? What about Krypton and Superboy? Hey, man, the kids of today, but now, of course, they're in their 40s. Yes, the kids of 1986 wanted something they could find for themselves. For the first time.
Well, I want to push back and at the same time agree with you about parts of this because that was the spiel for what they were doing here. They were like, you know what, it's making it difficult to tell stories. And I think that what it really is doing is it makes it difficult to tell certain types of stories, and particularly stories that were in vogue of that era. Like there were the idea of having superpowered brawls was becoming way more popular by the time you get to the 70s and into the 80s. So it's difficult to do that when Superman can just move the planet.
Right.
So I think those are flat out by this point for Superman and why they had to like reinvent that concept there. I think that there are elements. I think that this sort of like deity level kind of storytelling, this sort of like mythical standard for a character, you can do really interesting stories for, but that takes a very talented writer that isn't necessarily up to doing it every single month. Like there's a reason we talk about those Alan Moore stories that came out at that time where he was in that power set, or things like,
Right.
We talked recently about Miracle Man, for example, who was a character who was nowhere near as powerful as the Silver Age Superman, but was still infinitely powerful for the purpose of the story, and like all the miraculous things he does to reshape the world. And you could do that kind of story, but you can't do that story every month.
No.
Right. You're right about the other stories too. There were some epic things happening there, and that was. You're right. And it's a limited thing too.
And it's a monthly book, and like comic tastes by this point, like, we cite X-Men. X-Men was a soap opera that could have giant slugfests and cool things. Like a thing about superpowers that goes back to the earliest Superman stories, but superpowers in general, is what kind of cool puzzles can you put forward with your characters using those powers? You know, like if a character has electrical abilities, can it do something with electricity to bypass this thing? Superman in the 30s and the 40s was super strong and super fast and not a lot else. And so it's like, all right, well, what kind of things can he do to solve this calamity? Oh, he can pick up giant boulders and he can create a barrier, or he can hold a thing up. You know, he like, you know, as you introduce new types of powers, the Human Torch, like, oh, he'll spot weld a thing to fix problems. Like the Flash is all about, here's the science of a thing moving fast. And at a certain point, when your character can do everything infinitely well, right, then there's only, like, why would you ever come up with a more creative solution on how you can use super breath when he could just have pushed it with his fingertip? Like, he looked at it hard, you know, like, and
it really had reached the point of ridiculousness. And I'm going to tell you a true story here. I remember an issue of Superman comics where somebody steals Clark's car and he programs his nose, because he has super control, half to smell for the scent of Lois's perfume because she'd been in the car a little while before, and half to sense the other nostril to sense the smell of the new car. And he finds it through smell. It's, you know, come on, man. I'm reading. I'm trying to enjoy this here. You're killing me. You know, I do want to tell a couple of Superman stories, though. First of all, as Case mentioned, I'm an actor. I got into acting through costuming, and I've done Superman at cons and stuff. And we were back at the con a few years, you know, some years after that. And I was wearing a shirt like I am now, just a regular Superman shirt, and just in my street clothes. We were in the dealer's room, and Gina, my wife, was talking to somebody and negotiating for a sale of something over at a table. And I'm just sort of standing there waiting. And a woman comes over to me and says, she asked me, did you dress up as Superman here in the past? And I said, yeah, I did. Thanks. And she's like, I want you to know, my son met you back then, and he spent like 3 years thinking he met Superman.
Oh, that's awesome. Great.
And that was like the best moment of my life up to that point, because I really felt like I influenced at least one person.
I love those moments.
Yeah, me too.
Where cosplay really like makes it for a kid. We had Jo Colton on last year when we were talking Wonder Woman stuff, and she had a similar moment where she was interacting with a deaf fan, and she actually knew enough sign language for that fan to be like, oh, the real Wonder Woman knows sign language.
Right. Of course.
And like, that's so cool. Yeah. I love those moments where like you can really make a thing for a child.
Right. She's the Santa Claus from Miracle on 31st Street who speaks Dutch. Right. I have a similar story where I spoke Klingon to a woman who was speaking Klingon, but it's not as heartwarming.
more heart stabbing.
Yes. And the other thing I wanted to mention was this quote by Ian McIntyre, who's a voice actor and does a lot of different things. He said, Superman stories are a fantasy about how good it would be to have power. They're a fantasy about what it would be like if someone with power was good. And that really moved me. That's a guy who gets it. That's what that's about. A lot of the superheroes, and this is a different thing that happens, for instance, with Batman, where he's become a total psychopath himself, you know? The Nietzsche thing of don't stare too long into the void because the void stares at you. Batman has gone over that cliff and is like, having a bath, I guess. He's just he's in it. But the idea of Superman and the thing that made him special to me, makes him special to me, is the hope that he inspires in people, and the idea that we can be better. And I think that's been lost. I think that's been lost in a lot of comics. You know, they're more realistic. I'll give you that.
Oh, yeah.
Cutting off heads and hollowing them out, I guess. But that's not really what I came here for, guys. You know?
No, we came here for that central power fantasy of Superman. Like, that's why the show is there, where the idea is like, isn't it cool to imagine if you had that power of action, you would do the right thing?
Yeah, that would be amazing. What I do like, and I'm only going to lightly touch on this, what I do like about the new show is they've given him real problems. Mm-hmm. Like, my kid has emotional problems. Well, I can lift this truck over my head. That isn't helping.
Yeah.
that is counterproductive at this point. We're trying to, you know, the kid's having issues over here, and you're jacking the truck up into the air over your head. Doesn't really move that needle at all.
Right. Yeah, no, the Superman as dad scenario that has become popular recently, I think, is a great balance there, because you get the scenario where, like, there are problems you just can't punch your way out of.
Exactly.
Like, you've got to be there for people. And I do really appreciate that element. That said, this comic is trying to get more back to the basics here. So let's actually divvy into talking about the comic here. All right. So, Frank, you read this comic as it was coming out. I read this comic later on because I was very young when this comic's being published. I was alive. But,
oh, man.
I appreciate it.
But I was young. But I was I picked up a couple of the issues. I mentioned that there were a big part of how I got into like back issues of comics was like there was like a 50-cent bin at a bookstore that I would go to in the summertime, and they would have like lots of like random books from like the 80s and like early 90s and like late 70s, but like so a good chunk of Byrne's run I've picked up in random issues, and so probably about 4 of the 6 issues I had in singles. And then when trade paperbacks started to become big in the 90s, I picked up the trade immediately, and so I've lived with this book for a long time because it was the foundation for the Superman books I was reading when I got into comics. Like, I didn't experience pre-Crisis Superman until it was in post. Jmike, had you read this before?
No, I wasn't even born when this book came out. So you guys are like, oh, I was like, oh, I wasn't. Oh man, I came out like 2 years later. 2 years, yeah, 88. So I read this about a week ago.
Yeah, you goddamn super baby.
Well, what'd you think?
Oh, I loved it. It was great. What I did, like you said earlier, I did have some callbacks to like the Man of Steel movie, and I was like, oh, this is where they got that from.
That's right.
Okay, this is where. Okay, I see it now. This is yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
I read it about a week ago too, but for like the 100th time.
Right. So why don't we actually get into issue by issue and talk about like what's going on in these?
Sure. If you have time, yeah. I got the whole run of Superman over here too, if you want to do that.
I think we have time for the 6 issues of the Man of Steel mini, but not necessarily the rest yet.
I like issue 2 of the release of Superman where they actually tell Lex Luthor who Superman is, and he doesn't believe it.
Yeah, that's a great issue.
Anyway, back to our main topic here.
So Byrne, I believe in his outro on this, no, it was an interview I read with him somewhere, said that he regretted opening with the classic Krypton blowing up sequence. But in our discussion of Superman lore, the interesting part about that is like, sure, everyone knows about Krypton blowing up, and you can, do a very quick version of it if you need to. But it is actually always how you open a Superman origin. Like every single property never does in media res and then goes back. It always is like, we got to at least like have, shortest version is like All-Star Superman, like where it's like 4 panels, but we get that Krypton blew up. Parents were desperate. Mm-hmm. They got their kid to Earth. And that's always been the way that we do it. Prior to this comic coming out, Krypton was pretty cool. Like it was a place you wanted to be. It was a bunch of like action, like Flash Gordon style Supermen. At first they could leap like crazy distances. Eventually that was removed. So it could be like, why didn't they all just leave? How did a planet blowing up kill them if Superman has survived that? Oh, it's only when they're not on Krypton that they have powers. Okay, cool. But at the very least, like Krypton was always pretty awesome. And it was deconstructionist works that would show, oh, well, maybe it wasn't totally awesome. What do you get for the man who has everything? Where they show like the weird cults and so forth of Krypton. Like those kind of deconstructions had started to pop up, but they weren't the norm. It wasn't the status quo. Krypton was a pretty dope place.
You're talking about the Krypton of the old Fortress of Solitude with Jor-El and Lara holding up.
Yeah, with like headbands and little like half capes and
the spaceships made of gold because that's a thing. They discovered anti-gravity.
Yeah,
it didn't matter what you built it out of, and they had a lot of gold laying around. So yeah, whatever. We'll make it the worst thing you can use.
Dope outfits that look like Superman's outfit, just a different.
Right, everybody had a family crest on their chest and so on.
Right, exactly. So the decision was not to do that. And Byrne was not legally allowed to use the Donner Superman design because that was the Salkinds. Yeah, it was a licensed property, so they weren't able to use the actual designs, even though that was his big inspiration here. He wanted to go and base it on that. But we get a Krypton that is cold and sterile and not a place I want to be.
Right. There's no love. It's sort of almost post-singularity technologically. People have these bodysuits. They're connected to everything all the time. But before they even knew what that was, because again, it's 1986. Yeah. And they everybody has the same clothing. There's no real fashion sense. It's just the black bodysuit with the red cover.
Yeah. Little truss that go down the sides of the shirts and things.
Technology.
Yeah. I was expecting, I was surprised I didn't see Brainiac in those first couple of scenes. It was 2 completely different little, automatons or robots. They were
it's Calyx and then
but I was like, it's usually always like Brainiac.
Well, that's a newer innovation though. That came from the animated series. At this
fine,
well, the Byrne era Brainiac is going to take a minute to explain, and we don't have time to do that today because he doesn't show up in this book.
He's not in these first 6 issues.
But suffice it to say, it is an alien brain possessing a human psychic. It's real weird. But we do get like some. I actually rather like this like design for Kryptonian outfits, like the black sort of suits that have this like circuitry effect in profile.
Right, the little halo of circuitry. Exactly.
I think that's really cool. I like the sort of toga elements to the draped cloth work that goes over that. Lara having this huge headdress is interesting at the very least. The idea that Kryptonian babies, like Kal-El is not a product of a sexual union between Jor-El and Lara. It is literally just their DNA combined into a matrix.
Right. Mm-hmm. In this version, he's a standard Kryptonian in that regard. They changed that in the movie, but yeah.
And I like a lot of the things that are going on there, at the very least, to make you sad about the potential, but it is a potential already lost in this cold, desolate world, as opposed to a world that was vibrant and alive and you wanted to keep going. Like, it is mournful that they couldn't have done better, and that they are sending Superman to a world so that he can lead them away from the path that they took. There is a weird element here. So originally Byrne wanted to have Lara in the, like, pregnant, travel to Earth and give birth and then die. Because there's this very awkward component so this is 1986. And even though John Byrne is a Canadian or he's English by way of moved to Canada as a child and then came to the US. This is the Reagan era. There's a strong sentiment of being like, he's an American, damn it. And so there was a strong idea about being like, let's have Kal-El be born on Earth in America so that he can be like.
I'm really glad that was vetoed. That really would have.
Well, and so the workaround was that he's in a birthing matrix, but he doesn't actually get born until the ship lands on Earth.
Which they don't even cover here. There's 8 pages of Krypton blowing up, the rocket zooming away. The next scene is him as a teenager playing football.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the elements of, like, Lara being horrified by people. It's like, they bear their flesh.
Oh, God, they're naked.
Right. They're savages. Look, they're savages. You're going to send them to this planet. They're savages there.
Which, from a standpoint of being like, oh, well, he'll never know a bathroom. Like, I could see that, like, if you go the wrong, to take our society and be like, oh, throw it back to, like, literally the Stone Age. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that would be pretty jarring for people. Now, later revisions would add the element that Kryptonians weren't able to leave Krypton for a biologically determined reason, which is the Eradicator. And so Kal-El is explicitly genetically modified so that it wouldn't be there. That's a later revision. Basically, the idea is just like, oh yeah, that birthing matrix will survive a hyperspace jump here. So we're going to take a birthing pod and we're going to strap some rockets to it, which I kind of love just from, like, the Pulp Fiction roots of the character. And we're just going to send it fucking flying, hurtling away with a little piece of kryptonite attached to it to drag through hyperspace.
It shows the kryptonite going through hyperspace with him, in the prologue.
Yeah, exactly. You see the piece get attached to the rocket so that chunk becomes the principal. They're like, we're going to have kryptonite, but it's going to be one rock that's attached. And there'll be more out there, but for the most part, we're going to have that one rock at least to open up our stories.
That everyone has access to forever.
Well, but not everyone has access to. For the first, like, 5 years of the post-crisis Superman, it's very specifically you can track the movement of that kryptonite and how it gets split up and given to people. A good chunk of it's just in Metallo for a while. A piece gets carved off to be a ring for Lex Luthor, but, like, it's all from that same chunk. And it's only later that more chunks start arriving as, like, time has passed and more has, like, traveled. But at first it's just that one chunk. And I think that's a creative idea where it's like, all right, we're not going to remove this one story hook that we had, but we're going to make it that we can't just use it as a crutch. But so we get smash cut to Superman as a football star. Which is a novel concept. Yeah. Like, that had never been played with before, of him actually just, like, enjoying his powers and being kind of a show off.
Didn't have a dad to tell him not to go out there and do stuff.
Pocket being ashamed.
Yeah. Don't save me, son. That wasn't in here. I was disappointed.
All right. Were you looking forward to that?
I was like, where are they going to steal stuff from this for to make the movie? I'm like, I was expecting that to be in there too. And I was like, oh, wait, darn it. It didn't happen. I
noticed something about that scene. I know what you're talking about, the Kevin Costner Man of Steel scene, which everybody has a hard time with. But I noticed a very fine line. Okay, all the guys who are dads, they understand that scene. All the guys who are not dads, they're kind of pissed off because they don't understand that scene. So my advice is wait. Get back to me on that.
Well, and it's interesting to have this sort of, like, all-star Superman. Pardon the pun there. Like we've got a Superman who is the envy of everyone. Like everyone wishes they could be as good a football player, or they're all into him because he's the high school star. But we've got that moment of Jor-El being like, I am disappointed in you, and taking him to see the rocket for the first time. And this is how we get the explanation for how it was all done. We don't have the scene.
Did you just say Jor-El?
Sorry. Did I say Jor-El? Pa Kent. Thank you for catching that one. Too many dads. But yeah, so Pa Kent like reveals the whole like, oh well, we had a snowstorm and we just said that you were ours, rather than like the whole scene of like baby Kal-El having like the needle break on his skin and all the stuff that we saw in the classic like Action Comics #1 origin.
But if you go back even further to the first Christopher Reeve movie, nothing beats that scene with John Ford where he's like, look, I don't know what's going on, I don't know why you're here, but I know it's not to catch footballs. And that's what that is. That's a little bit of that. Like, come on, man. You can't just be phoning it in.
Absolutely. The specter of the 78 Superman movie certainly looms over this. Like we already cited the Kryptonian designs, elements here. Sure, it's a showboating Clark as opposed to a Clark who wishes that he could be allowed to participate in sports, but it's it's still that. And it's just like Byrne being like, no, wouldn't he dabble in showing off before, kind of coming to understand that that wasn't the right thing to do? We get the elements of, so Clark Kent officially is the child of Jonathan and Martha, and that's, I almost said Jor-El again, so sorry about that, of Jonathan and Martha Kent. So there's no reason to suspect otherwise. Like they are just, as far as anyone is concerned, looking into his records, it's like, oh yeah, he was born in Kansas. And we have all like X, Y, and Z doctors' records. It was during a storm, so they were on the farm. Yeah.
They had to fake all his vaccinations, though. I just want to get that in there.
Possibly, although he's only first indicated as being invulnerable when he's like 6 and a bull runs over him. But we see his powers grow, and
right. He doesn't even realize he can fly until he's a teenager.
Yeah, he gets pushed off a cliff by what fucking guy like is just on a cliff and lets a dog push him off? Like that could have gone so poorly. I'm glad. Recently, we talked about Superman for All Seasons, which was the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale book that kind of takes place between the issues of the Man of Steel. And so one of the nice things about that is that Rusty is just around the whole time, where Clark's like, oh, I want to see my dog. Please, hang on, I just want to pet my dog. Right. He like comes home just to see his dog sometimes. And it's just like, yeah, that's nice. And we get the confrontation with Kryptonite. We get the setup where it's like, oh yeah, that's attached to the ship. And it's not that big, but it's there. And Clark gets sick and passes out and has to be taken away. Is he just overcome with emotion, finding out that he's an alien?
Yeah, they don't hit that. They don't hit that too hard, which is nice.
They don't actually. They still kind of try to present him as being a human. The phrase they use to bring us back to our conversation about like make it like the X-Men is they call him a mutant a lot. They keep on being like, oh, we just assumed he was a mutant with weird powers, a human transformed strangely a lot. And it's only later where they're like, oh no, he must be an alien. And then he gets his own confirmation of that later.
Right.
I love that Ma Kent has the scrapbook of
all his exploits. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good compromise overall. If you're not going to do Superboy, but you want the idea that he's out there doing cool stuff, I think that's a good way to do it. It feels very Smallville.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely the kind of thing that character would do. It's solid writing that way because it's completely believable and in the tone of that character.
Like stay a little secretive, but like go out there and do good. I think that's all good stuff right there. And then we get like a very 80s moment because there's a space shuttle coming in that he has to save. And it doesn't look like the classic space shuttle of the 80s, but it is the space shuttle of the 80s.
I immediately thought of Superman Returns and the airplane scene. I was like, oh, snap, that's where that came from. I'm catching on here.
Yeah, and then he's in the crowd and he sees it starting to crash, and he has no choice. He has to leap out, and that forces him into the public, being revealed as an individual with superpowers, as opposed to a mysterious thing that just occurs. So here's a spot here. So post-Crisis, they decided that the Golden Age superheroes were going to be a part of DC continuity, which always feels weird with Superman being modern, because it's always like, wait, isn't that weird that people are astounded that someone might have superpowers when Green Lantern existed in the 40s?
Yeah.
And I always find that detail like a little bit weird here. Like this feels like an origin for a world that has not seen superpowers.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
It's a weird juxtaposition. Like how do you fit that together where it doesn't feel like one is like undercutting the value of the other?
Right. Well, I don't think that happened until later.
Well, I mean, like that. The thing is, DC editorial wasn't sure how it was going to fit together, so they just treat it like it isn't. Like
so many things, yes.
Yeah. We get a great Lois Lane. She's got that hold her right there, Buster moment. She's feisty and fiery and exactly how I want Lois Lane to be. I love how much personality she has. Like the fact that she can cow Superman. Like he just saved a goddamn space plane, and he's like, I got to listen to her for a second. Oh shit, there's a lot of people. And he freaks out and runs away.
Yep. Although he does mention that there's a spark that seems to pass between them.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of built up potential in the multiverse there, I guess.
And then we get Ma Kent making the Superman uniform.
The crest.
Yeah. Well, Pa and Clark come up with the crest, and it like comes to him out of inspiration. But Ma makes this like snug suit that like shows off his muscles. But I like this detail to a certain degree, which is that the reason why it's like a tight costume is that dirt or tears, none of that really accrues on tight clothes. It's like they just are all protected by Clark. And the meta lore that Byrne is trying to create is that part of the Superman power set is like a force field, like that he has like telekinetic abilities, kind of like what Gladiator has, which is another John Byrne Superman type character.
It's embarrassing, but back in the 70s, they actually had comic books that were just futuristic issues of what happened to Superman's suit. So some hobo would put it on and beat up somebody, and they would go to stab him, and the knife would bend or break because it was the Superman suit made out of the original blanket. And Superman didn't appear in these stories. It was just some guy who found the suit.
Oh, that's awesome! I'd love to see those if they.
No,
they were an idea of like exploring, like, oh, that's a cool thing. Whatever happened to his costume? That's all pretty dope.
Even as a child, I'm like, what the hell is this?
But I feel like this does a pretty good job of selling, like, okay, yeah, he's going to wear the tight suit because that's not going to get destroyed.
What they say, and it's a weird detail, is that each of his cells becomes like a solar battery. And I think that ties into your force field idea. Anything that's right up against him, or that he's touching, or that, puts his cape over or whatever, it's invulnerable for that period of time.
But the cape is not invulnerable. And that becomes like a telltale sign of the post-crisis Superman, where we get all these dramatic shots of him being hit by a bomb and like his costume's perfectly intact, but his cape's in tatters. And you can see like just how terrible the effect was on him. So that's a telling point there. I like how they also sell the Clark Kent persona, where it's like, look how if he stoops and we comb his hair back and we put on these like big thick glasses, like he looks like a totally different guy.
Which I think is hilarious because Henry Cavill's actually done that in New York.
Yeah. I mean, it is shocking how if you just change the context of what you're seeing a person in just a little bit, you can be like, wait, is that do I know this guy? No, I don't. I'm crazy. I can't possibly know this person. The next issue is the Lois Lane issue where she is trying to track down Superman, and we get a lot of very 80s fashion as perceived through John Byrne's lens. There's quite a few details I rather like about this whole thing. Lois Lane's like pursuit of him, the fact that like he's moving around so fast that it's difficult for anyone to get a word in edgewise.
The face vibrating, where this originates.
That's a really cool detail. I like that idea that like, oh yeah, photos just aren't very clear because he's always like moving a little bit faster than what a camera can like capture. Like that's all really cool. It's like just a little blurry. He has some cop energy going on a few times, and I don't love that part. Like when he like stops a purse snatcher and takes the purse back to the lady who it was stolen from, and then like turns down her music, and it's just like be a little more polite, young lady. And
a little too loud here. Calm that down, please.
But sure, whatever. He stops some armed robbers. Sure, whatever. Like, classic Superman kind of stuff.
Well, this is what I was saying. You can't. It's great for an intro issue too. You can't do this every week. Every month. Superman pounds a thug. It's dull. It doesn't go anywhere.
I love the montage of Lois Lane showing up late every single time Superman has done something. That's really cool. And we get some fun outfits in all of that. And then we get an appearance of Jimmy, who suggests like, well, it's too bad you can't be the person in danger. And she decides to sink her own car in the river to see if Superman will save her.
And he does.
Yeah. And then has
a little sit down chat with her.
Yep. And a very 80s apartment. We get that kimono hanging up on the wall as like art decoration. And we get a spot where she's like, would you like some white wine and brie? And he says, I don't drink and I've never developed a taste for brie. And I'm like, oh, Superman. Like, we're trying to sell this like country boy thing too hard. Like, come on now. But also, like, what a basic bitch thing it is to be like white wine and brie.
Because he tried to leave the first time, and she was like, "Hey, get back over here." He was like,
yeah,
oh.
no, that's a good moment there. Well, and then him revealing that he could identify that she had
a breathing tank in
like
her
an
car?
aqua lung. She had a breathing apparatus under the seat. So he knew the whole time. Like, that's a really cool element right there.
In case Batman or somebody showed up and they weren't able to get the car out.
But then he beats her to the story, and he Lois Lane comes in with like I've got the testimonial about Superman. Clark Kent already got it. I'm curious about his sources. I'm curious. I'm curious how that's verified.
Look, Lois, I know you're a prize-winning reporter, but you're never going to figure this out. It's the same guy.
But I love that as an introduction for the basics of the Daily Planet life. You know, the managing editor, Perry White, not the editor-in-chief, managing editor. He's on the floor actually working with everyone. Mm-hmm. You know, we got Lois Lane.
We get to see the big Daily Planet ball on top of the building. We get to see Perry White, Clark rocking his Clark Kent look, Perry chomping on a cigar, just the way it's supposed to be.
It looks like a workplace comedy, or like a 80s like New York workplace drama, or dramedy, or whatever you describe it as, like that kind of vibe. The thing that the Donner movie did so well of being like, these scenes look like the scenes that you would expect to take place here. Like, they look like an office scene, which makes me wonder, like, would a proper Superman show adapted now set in Metropolis, because Superman and Lois is set in Smallville, have like the office stuff be like the office? Like, have those moments there.
Right. Nothing beats the Donner moment though, when she says to him, "Any more at home like you?" And he just goes blank. He's like, not really, no.
But then we get to issue 3, and issue 3 is one of my 2 favorites in this collection. It is the Batman issue.
Yes,
the Batman issue. I won't hit. This is my favorite.
This issue sets up the dichotomy between Batman and Superman as actually being begrudging allies as opposed to best friends. And I think that's really cool.
Back in the 30s, their introduction was, I don't remember it exactly, but they're on a boat and they end up in the same stateroom, and an emergency happens. They have to run back to their stateroom, and they're literally in the middle of changing clothes. So Clark Kent is turning into Superman. He's putting on the Batman cowl, and the light comes in from outside, like an explosion happens. They're like, whoops. So it's completely ridiculous. This was a lot more sophisticated and a lot better. And at the same time, you know, as I say, I hate to use this word, totally accessible to younger readers.
Yeah, like, they're trying to sell this Batman. He looks like the Batman from like Frank Miller's Year One. We've got, it's this earlier era character. And I got to say, I love the John Byrne Batman. Like, I love his drawing, like when he draws Batman. I think he nails the chin perfectly. Like the whole cowl looks so good. Like when we did Superman Batman Generations, where when we get to the 90s and like Bruce Wayne takes up the role again, I'm like, that's my favorite Batman look, period. Like, it's just such a, like, John Byrne drawing Batman sometimes is just the best looking Batman. I don't know why. For me, like, I realize some people like the like more dramatized, like big crazy ears Batman look, but like sometimes it just works to have like a guy who looks like a brick shit house, but not uncomfortably so. Like, he looks like he could still like do some parkour.
Well, he's pretty muscular here.
Yeah, he's muscular, but he can do some leaps. And we see that as he tries to pursue this like one hoodlum that he had like initially cornered, only for his grappling hook to be snatched by Superman, who's like, "You're a reckless vigilante." And even though some people have called me the same thing, I don't approve of a guy just beating up other guys instead of the law. So I'm going to take you to jail now. And Batman has to evade.
Yeah, because like he had hooked his grapple around an eagle, and I was like, how did he miraculously pull that off of there without him noticing?
He's Superman?
Yeah.
That's the only answer I have. I'm sorry. But I think this is one of the more clever ways of handling a situation with some caveats. So Batman evades Superman and then gets a warning off being like, if you come any closer, I've got a force field or force field's the wrong term because that makes it sound like it's going to repel you. It's a detection field that if dense biological mass enters the space, it'll kill a random person in Gotham, or rather an innocent person in Gotham. And he's like, my senses tell me that you're not lying, that an innocent person will die. And so he's like, I guess, hang on, that's really fucked up of you. Talk. He's like, I'm going after a criminal. Do you want to help? And he's like, that's a weird way of being like, do you want to be best friends? Okay.
Did we just become best friends? Yep.
And we get some really fucked up crimes here for this character called Magpie, who steals shit but also replaces it with deadly stuff in exchange, such as explosive balls or a chess piece that fires razor blades at people.
Yeah.
Really explosive, really deadly thing. Yeah. Blows the head off one of the thugs.
That thug, when he gets back, it's just like, this is such a grim moment there. She like paralyzes him and then puts a dynamite stick in his mouth, and they're like, not happy birthday, not happy birthday. Like she does that all the time.
Right. You just did a happy birthday. Oh, I am not cleaning this up again.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. And we see that the top part of that guy's in pieces on the lower part of that guy when we cut back to it. But it's a fun bit of team up work for them. You know, like Superman bypasses a lot of the detective work that Batman would have to do. He can just hear where they're at. So he's like, we got to go there. And
the art here borrows a little bit from the old World's Finest, which is nice. The two of them, Superman flying, Batman swinging it on a cable. It's the standard. It's what you want to see.
Yeah, and they work well together up until Magpie drops just like a thing of acid or acid cloud or death smoke, whatever. I don't know. It's gas. It's like acid. It's eating.
I always like the S's and Seymour.
As in Superman. Superman busting through a wall just like a George Reeve right there.
As you do.
So this is a trick I saw a bunch in the 80s, and I don't know when it first shows up. Like, it might be here. It probably wasn't, though, where he like sucks up gas, flies into space, and breathes it out. It is also done in Death of the Family, the Jason Todd death story, which happens like 2 years after this. So like it happens a bunch around this period, and like I said, I don't know when it first shows up, but he does so, and this is a good opportunity to set up a limitation of Superman. He sucks up all this like terrible toxic gas, flies into space, breathes it out. We get this kind of cool effect as it crystallizes, where it's like this like squared off, like it's all like right angles on everything, which easy to do if this was digital art, and I'm not sure how they did it in pencil. Like that would be a pain in the ass to draw. But he admits that he has exhaled all the air in his lungs, and he has to fly back to Earth. And this sets up the 80s and 90s concept that Superman needs some kind of breathing apparatus to be in space for a long time. Like, he can hold his breath for, like, really long chunks of time. But if he doesn't...
And this is a case where he's not holding his breath. He's just expelled what would have been the air that he could have held on to.
Yeah, and this is a Byrne thing to, like, have a lot of, like, expository things going on in people's thought bubbles. But here, I think it's really appropriate. Like, he's like, all right, yep, breathe all that shit. I better fly back. And it has nothing to do with the story, but it does set up the limitations for the character going forward. Because, you know, this whole mini is laying the groundwork for, like, what writers are expected of Superman once the books restart after the series is done.
He goes back to Batman. Batman has the crime lab in the trunk of the Batmobile.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff.
A different variation of the Batmobile, too. I was like, what is this?
It's not so much a Batmobile as just like a dope car that has like a crime lab in a trunk that he happens to drive. It's early Batman. Anyway, so he figures out that there's a fiber that's 5,000 years old. It's like, she can't be that old. It's like, obviously fucking not, Clark. Come on. No. He's definitely at the museum. So we're going to go to the museum. And she breaks down and they're like, she's not the really bad people. She's just crazy and there's collateral damage. Because of that.
Right. Like all of Batman's villains. She's just completely out of her mind.
I do like her breakdown when she starts being like, it's mine, you can't have the pretty things. Like that whole bit right there.
My precious.
Yeah, total collapse. I love the Batman in shadow and just solid black. Whenever the light's on him, you get the typical black and blue outline of the cape and the cowl and so on. But in the last panel here, he's behind Superman. Oh, it's not the last panel. The last panel of this scene, right after the breakdown. He's in the shadow behind Superman, and it's just black. You know what I mean? He's actually like projects like a hole in space when you look at him, which is what the character would need to be. I like that. I think Byrne captures that, like you said, as Batman is spot on.
Yeah, it's fucking great. I will admit that the first comic book I ever read was The Untold Tales of Batman, which was a John Byrne drawn collection of stories that sort of like acted as like, here's all the history for someone coming in as like a digest form of like, here's Batman looking through all of the villains he's ever encountered kind of thing. So I might just be like horrifically or like not scarred, but like bonded to that design, because that was like the first like comic Batman I saw after like Adam West and like Michael Keaton. But it's there. I'm imprinted. It's there. I love the John Byrne Batman. And so after all this is all done, Superman's like, oh, hey, what about the bomb you put on an innocent person in Gotham? And he's like, oh, yeah, that. And he pulls it out of his bat belt.
Here you go.
Just like, oh, yeah, it was me. I'm innocent. I'm the guy. Which is a ballsy take.
Right. I like that they borrow a little bit from a little bit of Star Trek here with it. In another reality, I might have called him Fred. I've heard that line. I can't remember.
Well, he's got those pointy ears there. Next up, we've got then the introduction of the modern Lex Luthor.
He's got hair. The red hair, too.
Yeah, but before that, we got the opening splash page of 80s Lois Lane and this like crazy frock that, like, on the one hand, I'm like, damn. On the other hand, I'm like, that is very 80s.
Oh, yeah. That's some outfit.
Like rereading this, my grandfather was a Republican congressman. We've got all these pictures of these like balls that he went to with the Reagans and the Bushes. And it's like, man, I am dead positive that either Nancy Reagan or my grandmother wore a dress very similar to that in one of those shots. And I'm like, makes me very uncomfortable. But very 80s dress. It's stunning, but it's a very 80s dress.
Yeah, she's got the hair up. She's decked out. This is they're going to
oh yeah, you're going to a dope party with like one of the richest men in the world. Like, yeah, you got to look good. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. We get a look at Clark's apartment, which, you know, we saw Lois's before. This is a pretty good apartment. Apparently, he makes a pretty good living as a reporter.
Yeah, somehow. It's a very, very swanky bachelor pad he's got there.
He's got his like little like trophy section, like celebrating his football career, which Lois like calls out, like, what the fuck?
You played football? Oh yeah.
Which I don't know. Yeah, he then comments on it and is like, I still work out and so forth. And she says like he keeps having a good figure. And I'm like surprised that she's surprised that he would have been a football player, because they keep talking about how he's, you know, 6'4" and like 250 pounds of muscle.
Yeah, but he doesn't project the personality of the typical high school jock. He seems bookish, nerdish.
That's true.
You know,
he never brings it up ever.
Clark Kent never slips up and does something really athletic on the side. You know, he's always like, oh, you know, the guy hits him and he falls over.
At the office, every time he like,
almost like a clown.
He crumples up a piece of paper and always misses every time the trash can.
Right. Exactly. Which statistically you'd be like, dude, you're trying to miss.
But the flip side, though, is then he's got the display set up. So he's like clearly proud of it.
Got the display set up, and then she finds his weights, which is a weird scene. But we skipped
before that, we get the shaving scene. So pre-crisis, canonically, while he was exposed to a yellow sun, his hair would not grow. So he never needed to shave because it wouldn't grow there in that scenario. But every time he left the yellow sun of Earth, he could grow a beard and have to make sure to like shave it before coming back. So this is like, oh no, he grows facial hair, guys. And the way he deals with that is that he has a curved piece of metal from his spaceship that he fires his heat beams into.
And reflects it back to his own face.
Which is fun. I like the pageantry of being like, I'm going to turn on an electric razor. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to have it like buzzing. Why does he have that?
Yeah, exactly.
For just such occasions.
For the extremely specific occasion that Lois Lane comes over to his apartment while he needs to shave.
Anyone. There's a thing in here in the next scene where she discovers his weights. She decides to do a few reps. And I don't know why.
And she just started curling him.
But she says, these weights aren't much heavier than the ones I use. How are you maintaining that physique with these weights? And he's like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So he's clever, but he obviously isn't.
He's got a facade that he's built up. He's like, all right, yeah, I'm in shape. I've got to have a reason to be in shape. I don't have a beard, so I have to have a reason not to have a beard. Yeah, I always found that like both a fun concept, although it's also a little weird. Where I'm like, all right, I get it for like the barbells that she's using. That probably there aren't that many weights on it, and she would notice it. But he's also got like a full weight rack there. That I guess he just didn't put the pin in very low. Well, not, like it's a full bench press rack.
Yeah, it's sort of a universal that they don't show you very well.
So it did occur to me. I'm like, on the one hand, like, yeah, it's a nice call out to be like, oh yeah, he just wouldn't know what a heavyweight is. On the other hand, like, I mean, that's kind of a jump to conclusions, being like, oh yeah, you don't work out with any heavyweights. It's like, maybe he was doing lighter curls. Maybe he was working as reps. Like, you know, I don't know. I think it was a narrative, like it was a clever bit right there that doesn't hold up when you actually like scrutinize.
Yeah, don't look too close.
But I love that Lex Luthor had sent a helicopter for them.
Yeah.
And she mentions that her ride showed up early, and then we find out that the ride is a helicopter sitting on the top of the building, and that like the building's probably not zoned for that.
Yeah.
Right. And he makes the point of, this is illegal. No doubt. You know, let's go.
And they go to this mega yacht, really fucking big. Like looking at it, just period, it's huge. Whatever the ship is.
Yeah, it's like a cruise ship. It's like a cruise ship with a big helipad on top of it. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And then they get off the helicopter, they fix the hair, and they run downstairs, and it's just a luxury yacht, just exactly what you'd expect. And then we have Lex Luthor, who's sort of an amalgam of the old Lex Luthors. Really old Lex Luthor had red hair. And then they did the story where Lex Luthor and Clark were friends as teenagers, and Superboy was responsible for the accident where he loses his hair, and that's why he hates him. And that was pretty thin. But here he's got the heaviness of the later bald Lex Luthor, but he's still got the red hair brushed back.
Yeah, but clearly balding.
Yeah.
It's this receding hairline style.
The giant bow tie. that's a little nice little nod too.
Yeah, it feels like a very classic Lex, although it's very much this like the businessman Lex. You know, this is the Lex Luthor that pretty much has shaped all future renditions of the character. Like, I can't imagine a scenario where they go just purely mad scientist Lex. Like, the businessman Lex is kind of here to stay, at least in some capacity. Because the idea is, if you're so smart and evil, why aren't you rich? It's like, fair point. Yeah, he would do some shitty things to like make sure that he was rich. Like, regardless of how smart he is, he's always going to be smart enough to be like, yeah, I can start a business that I can run in my spare time while I also, you know, do my sciences.
Do some shady stuff on the side.
This whole scene between Lois, Clark, and Lex has like a John Byrne art thing that once I noticed it, I was like, fuck, I can't stop paying attention to it. Everyone's always turning to camera to talk in all these shots, like our view of the audience. So like every single one of them, when they're speaking, turns and maybe their head's tilted towards it. They're always like cheating back, like right, like regardless of their pre-existing blocking. So it's like this very kind of TV kind of look, or like theater kind of look of how you would do it. It's not even like shot reverse shot. Like Clark turns away and he has his hands out and he like turns back to Lex, being like, I'm just thinking about these things. It's just like kind of a funny way of John Byrne trying to like get the most character detail in the frame, because he likes to rather have single frame with a lot of dialogue rather than like lots of like reverses and all that.
Right. It's cinematic in a way too.
Yeah, it feels very theatrical.
Right. I agree with that. This became the style because of the X-Men and stuff. If you look at those issues, they've done a lot of this stuff too. The white background with just the characters. But like you say, turning into the camera.
Yeah, it's so good for like a soap opera style, you know? Like where you've got and like the X-Men was a soap opera with superpowers. And you can see how that style is being brought over here to now what is the flagship book, but it needed that kind of energy. It needed that kind of interpersonal drama and like those kind of dialogue scenes where, you know, people are mad at each other. People are boasting at each other. People are having these big emotional moments that, you know, I think a lot of people by this point looking at Superman thought it was too bland or too much for kids. And they wanted to have like sparring between wordplay and so forth, and like a little bit of sexiness. Like here, Lois, like when she finds out the dress was a gift from Lex, not just a rental, she like takes it off, and we get this sort of like sexy shot of her wearing Clark's coat and her leg like sticking out. You know, like
get this thing off me.
She gives him back the dress right in the middle of the party. She doesn't even go to a restroom or anything to take it off. She just takes it off.
Eyes front, mister. Yeah, just stand there and be as wide as you know how.
Right. And then she accuses Luthor of looking like Fred Mertz, which, of course, you know, unhappy shock reaction from that. You know, nice little Lucy tie.
And then we get an 80s moment here, which is the casual approach to terrorism.
Right. And then for some reason, There is a bunch of terrorists in camp.
Like, it's like when you go back and look at like E.T. or something like that from the 80s, where it's just like, no, you can't be a terrorist for Halloween. And it's like, ooh, that hits different for those of us who spent most of our life post 9/11.
Yeah.
They hit Clark and he fakes being knocked out, so they throw him over the edge.
So that's the end of Clark. He's dead now.
Oh yeah, totally dead. Just deader than dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ship gets picked up, and I need to look up the history of Sam Lane as a character, because there very well may be pre-existing stuff from the 70s, but this is my first encounter with the idea that Lois is an army brat.
Really?
And I don't know, like if they.
I don't think this is where that's.
It would be weird to introduce it here, but it's my first time observing it.
Your first time seeing it, but I got to be honest, I can't tell you where it was first introduced either.
But the idea that Sam Lane was like an army general and Lois Lane came up and
right.
It must have shown up somewhere, but like it doesn't feel like something that would have been part of the 60s. So like, where does it come in?
Yeah,
so it's like 70s, early 80s. I don't know where, but it's here. And this Lois, like,
she's not
picks up an Uzi and starts fighting terrorists real good.
Like, did she kill that guy?
Probably. She kicks someone in the balls, steals his Uzi, and then just starts firing, and we don't see where she's firing at. Yeah, probably a few people are dead.
I was like, I was not expecting that. That's awesome, but kind of crazy.
Yeah, then Superman picks up the ship that they're on, and this is another spot where we talk about like the psychic nature of Superman powers. He talks about how it seems that things are lighter when he's flying than when he's on the ground. And that's, I think, a continuation of this idea, which would have in universe the culmination with like Con-El Superboy, where he only has one of Superman's powers, which is the telekinesis part, and it's like magnified to be a telekinetic force field. So like this is laying the groundwork for a lot of stuff that would come in the 80s and the 90s. Probably not intended. Probably Byrne was just like, how does he fly? I bet he's telekinetic and he can lift himself from the like with the power of his mind.
They did a terrific Fantastic Four story with where they face
Gladiator,
and the Shi'ar guard, where they just cause him to doubt himself, and his powers like evaporate for a half a second,
right?
Because he doesn't believe in himself.
Yeah, John Byrne was really into the idea of a lot of those powers were like the power of the mind,
right, as opposed to simple brute force.
Like Superman is super dense. He is strong on the ground. He's picking things up with his muscles, but that's different than when he like takes off. And when he takes off, he can lift other things up with it, you know? And I like that exploration of the powers. Like, it does lock you into a type, you know, like, for a little while they tried to present that his heat vision was that he could telekinetically accelerate molecules. And eventually they were like, or it's sunbeams from his body and from the battery storage. And people are like, or whatever. Who the fuck cares? That's not the important part. But it is fun sometimes to be like, well, how would that work? What is the science of Superman?
That's a whole topic unto itself. It evolves over time.
We did an episode on that one, actually, which is because they did like a documentary.
Over time. Like I said, originally they were just so evolved, they were all super. Yeah. So it changes depending on where you come into it.
Yeah, I miss those Golden Age books where like, how is Superman so strong? Well, if you look at ants, they're really strong. And if you're a super advanced human, maybe you'd be just as strong as an ant is, proportionally speaking. You know, shit like that. So Superman stops the terrorists, you know, because what are they going to do? Like, they're people with guns. Like, Lois Lane is winning before Superman shows up.
Right, well, these are low-level thugs that, it turns out, have been hired by Lex Luthor to stage this.
Basically, yes. And he was a little too smug.
So they're basically cosplayers.
And he admits it in front of the mayor, who's just like, that's really fucked up, dude. And he tries to buy off Superman, and Superman's like, I don't need this. Have you seen my apartment? I don't need this shit. And he takes Lex Luthor to jail, which... Jmike, if you remember when we talk about For All Seasons,
he did that too.
This happened. This is the immediate scene before the issue where Lex Luthor comes out of jail.
Right.
Okay.
He thinks Clark's been murdered still, and he has to say, "Well, no, actually,
I saved him a while ago."
Yeah, I saved his life first, guys. Clark is fine. It's cool.
Don't worry about that. That's not a thing.
Yeah, we get Superman saving a pregnant woman from having a baby in the subway, because subways are gross in the 80s, guys. And Lex Luthor like offers a like, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you, Clark.
Get you.
Or Superman, I should say. There is a photo taken of him. There are two reads on this one. One is that it's Lana Lang at the end because she also has been following Superman. Or two, it's Lex Luthor because he's been tracking data on Superman. And by the time we get into the main book, he's compiled quite a bit of info on Superman. But either way, he issues an ultimatum that you're going to be a dead man. Like, I'm Lex Luthor. You can't,
Can't do this to me.
And then we pick up my other favorite issue in this arc.
Why is that, Case?
I don't think you understand the concept of his favorite.
Well, I said I have two. I said I have two favorite issues. I can say that I have two favorites, and this one is the other one. And honestly, if it was weighted, this is actually my favorite.
Favorite?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
in English. You just say favorite.
Yeah, in English. Okay, sure. My favorite, and my second favorite's the Batman. So my actual favorite is the Bizarro issue.
And here we are.
So first up, we open with you're getting sloppy Luthor, him holding a guy in the suit, and you're supposed to think that Lex Luthor's in the suit.
Yeah.
Because that's from behind.
Green and purple power suit.
Right, exactly. It's the 70s, 80s battle suit that Lex would wear to fight Superman. And then we pull the camera around, and he's talking to Lex, who's sitting at a desk, and there's just a dude in the suit with the helmet on. And we find out, oh, fuck, this suit will fuck your brain up if you wear it for too long. That is so brutal. He even jokes about it being he's liable to be and it's that's fucked up to just joke about it. Oh, you broke a person's brain just now with your personal vendetta against Superman. Okay, but it was all a ruse. This more bald Luthor than he was in the last issue.
Yeah, a little, overnight in jail too, that's it.
Well, yeah. It's just a receding hairline, guys. So he steps back, and he's got a Chinese scientist that he talks about how he's smuggled out of communist China, because again, Reagan era.
Yeah.
Who has a duplicating device that they scan Superman and created this duplicate. And this is the first time in the book where we address the fact that people can figure out he's an alien.
Yeah, this is all over the place, actually. But yes.
Yeah, I think this is a really cool element. This is the first time where we introduce the idea that it would be difficult to clone a Kryptonian, because previously Bizarros, you could make a Bizarro anything. It was just an imperfect duplicating machine. In this case, you can make a perfect duplicate of an Earth-born creature, but you can't do that of a Bizarro or rather, for a Kryptonian. It's going to create a Bizarro, and so we get this artificial construct that's a biomatrix perfectly duplicating organic life, but it's crystallizing. It's kind of fucked up because Kryptonians are just different. And we get this nice little name call where it's just I certainly did not want this bizarre. Oh, forget it.
Right. Oh my goodness.
And then we get the Lucy Lane subplot in here.
Showing the Lucy Lane thing, which is where it gets a little more, again, soap opera-ish, dramatic.
Is this the first time that she'd ever been in the comics period, or?
No. Lucy Lane had existed for a long time, usually as a love interest for Jimmy Olsen.
All right.
But the blind thing is new. And here's the thing. Here's actually why I love this issue so much. It is a direct update of the first appearance of Bizarro, which was a Superboy story where Bizarro is created and befriends a blind girl. And when he fights with Superboy, the destruction of that Bizarro cures the blindness. So this is an updated version of that story, but I love that they're doing that here. We got so Bizarro saves some ambulances and whatnot, and then Lucy Lane tries to kill herself, and Bizarro just saves her, and she can see a little bit.
Well, at this point, what you don't realize is that the Bizarro creature thinks that it is Superman.
Yeah,
it doesn't know. It just popped into the world a few minutes ago, and has enough of his memories to think it is Superman. And of course she's blind, so she doesn't see falling apart or whatever.
Because there was a scene where he rescued a guy, and the guy was like, "Oh, thanks. Oh, wait, you're not Superman."
Right. And they run, and we see, we don't see very well, but we see that there's this weird effect going on in his reflection, but we don't see his actual face.
Right. Again, theatrically staged.
Yeah. We get Jimmy talking about how someone smashed $1,000 worth of glass to steal a suit that's only worth a couple $100, and we get Superman showing up to encounter this creature who has put on a suit and has taken sunglasses and popped out the lenses and is starting to slowly put together his Clark Kent outfit.
Right. And, great Scott.
Yeah, that's when they get into a fight, and that Bizarro is not holding back.
No.
One thing to note is that the Bizarro here has just Superman's powers. Like, while he is a failed duplicate, he doesn't have the ice vision, fire breath reversal going on.
Right. Yeah, no, which was always a little square Earth. If you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're trying to get into that more abstract kind of like, oh, it's like you, but like it is on a narrative level being like flipped around. In this case, it's just like, no, he's just a fucked up clone of Superman. And, this is very directly the inspiration for the Bizarro we get in the animated series, which has like the most gut punch of an episode when he like sacrifices himself to save Lois. Like, though, so clearly like we've got some strong stuff going on here. But rather than things like the reverse S or like a lot of warping, the way they handle having him be distinctly different is that Superman blasts him with his heat vision, and he's left with this like burned version of the costume. Like the blue is a lot darker, the reds are more like a maroon.
Yeah, it's really, really, really well done the way they do that here.
He's monstrous and mute, and he forcibly kisses Lois in the sky, and then we return to Lucy, and the fight continues, where Superman's having a hard time, but he's able to scan Bizarro and be like, oh, it's actually a non-living creature. It's, this like, it is effectively an android. Like, Jmike, you'll recall when we looked at the Nail, they presented the Bizarros as being like super sophisticated robots. And in a certain sense, they actually are. Like, they're clones, but they're like artificial clones.
But what happens here in the dialogue is that he reveals to the creature that it's not him, that, the girls and him make it clear that this guy's Superman, and the creature realizes that it's not.
Right.
That he's not.
And that's a blow. If you think you're Superman and then you find out you're not real. But then we get this moment where Bizarro, having observed the information that every time he's around Lucy, her vision gets better.
Right.
Rams Superman at full speed. And the exploding cloud of dust created by the destruction of Bizarro Kryptonian cells is enough to actually fully heal her.
Yeah.
A thing they set up earlier, because they talk about how if they could figure out the right chemical, it could like fix her eyes, which is like convenient for the plot. But it's a direct callback to, in that Superboy issue, it was the shockwave of them colliding that caused the blind Smallville girl to have her vision restored. And it's nice that we do this and have it be part of like the main cast, like.
And here you see where you pointed out the torn cape. The rest of the outfit's fine, but there's a little tear in the back of the cape after the collision.
Yeah. Yeah. Very dramatic looking right there. Like I said, I really love that issue. I think it's such a wonderful update of like a Silver Age story, and kind of plays into a thesis I will share when we get to the end of this.
Okay.
But then the last issue is Superman coming face to face with his Kryptonian heritage. He comes home to Smallville. We get to see that Ma and Pa Kent are still alive at this point too. And like, some people listening are going to be like, yeah, so what? Whatever. Ma and Pa Kent always died before Superman became Superman. Like, that was always like a big part of his origin.
Well, just Pa Kent.
No. But going back to like Action Comics, Ma dies first, then Pa dies. And he's like, you must do good for your world. And like later we get stuff like the movies and things where Ma is still alive. But like that balance of like either Kent, but especially both of them still being alive as an adult, is novel. It was not a part of Superman until we get to this series.
The old Adventures of Superman TV show it was Pa who died.
Yeah. I wonder if that's just like adaptations go for Pa die, like as a thing.
Yeah. And then of course in the 78 movie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a very powerful scene.
Yeah.
That's still a very powerful scene for me.
And I think like a lot of us are kind of leaning towards like, oh yeah, Pa should die eventually because that's a thing that Superman can't solve. Like,
not in tornadoes.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Not in
tornado.
No, a heart attack is a perfect example because that's a thing that like it shows the limits of your powers. Like, yeah, you can do all these wonderful things, but you can't stop everything. There are things outside of your control. And I like that element. And I think that like generally we're kind of moving towards that direction that like Pa should probably die first and be like a big pivot point for Superman. But here they're trying out like, let's have them both be alive. Let's see what that's like. And that's what, led to all the 80s and 90s material and all the adaptations from that era having both of them alive. But so we get them all hanging out, and it's nice, and there's a hint that someone's back in town, but they won't say whom. And then Superman's like, I'm hungry, it's nighttime, I'm gonna go steal some pie from the fridge. And that's when he's face to face with a hologram of his actual father, of Jor-El.
My space dad.
and we can see him being like flooded with information about Krypton, so much so that he starts speaking in mixed words of Krypton, like Kryptonese mixed in with like regular English. And he sees Krypton, this like terrifying, cold, desolate world of technological pillars and craggy surface that can't support life. And as he comes out of it, Lana Lang is face to face with him. And we get sort of an exploration of that relationship, which is dramatically different than where it was pre-Crisis. Because pre-Crisis, you know, Lana Lang was the Lois for the Superboy stories. Mm-hmm. And then she was introduced into his adult life as like another part of the love triangle. So that like it could be another competitor, another suitor, you know, it was his co-anchor for GBS, you know, like she played a similar role. When Superman was split between red and blue, they both had like the loves that they wanted to go to, but they fundamentally were very similar roles. Like one was the one that was always in his life, mm-hmm. And the other is the one who was his like adult love. But like they still are both people who didn't know about his secret identity, who he, you know, did this little dance with of being like, I'm Clark, I'm Superman, like like we can go on a date kind of thing. And this reframes it more as best friends. You know, like she loved him, but she saw that like Superman's too big for small town Kansas.
Well, you know, she lets him know that it really messed up her whole life and she had to leave and come back.
Right. Which to a certain degree, she's kind of done dirty in this.
Yeah.
You know, a person that she loved had to like reveal that he could fly and he could do all this wonderful stuff. And I'm glad that they've had the chance to explore on that more. Like, again, For All Seasons is a great companion to this, where we get like the last issue is all from Lana's perspective, and we find out a lot more about her relationship with Clark and how that has developed. And then, you know, this became a thing where going into the 80s and 90s, Lana knew who Clark was. And so he could be a person or rather, she could be a person that he could come talk to. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we could see how her life develops and like how they intermingle every now and then. And like they know each other's secrets, but it's not the same kind of pressure because it's not just Lois part 2. You know, it helped her like have her own niche, which I think is good to explore. And nice to set that sort of different character beat for her, because, you know, I think a lot of people responded negatively to the fact that they were like kind of playing the same role up until that point, like, or it's just like, oh, is Superman just Archie? Is it just Betty or Veronica all the time? And this was trying to like fashion out like more specific character arcs for them.
It never occurred to me, but I think you have a valid point there. The Betty or Veronica Archie thing.
So Superman discovers that his rocket is gone.
Right.
But he is being subjected to even more holograms from his father up until Jonathan shows up with a shovel and smacks a hologram, and it kind of explodes, burns up the shovel, and Superman is being flooded with all this information about Krypton. And he like goes off to think about it, and he's like, ultimately, it doesn't matter. I'm an American citizen, you all. I was born here in Kansas. And this is my whole, like, it's very, very Reagan-era 80s. Right there. Actually, we didn't mention this. In issue 1, there's a spot where it's just like, you have a responsibility as an American citizen to do good. They use that line quite a few times. But yeah, Superman like flies off to the Himalayas and is just like thinking through all the Kryptonian stuff and decides like, no, like, you know, for like, I am human first. And this becomes like the thesis for Clark Kent in the 80s and 90s, that he's Clark Kent and he goes out as Superman to use his powers to do good, mm-hmm. but his true self is Clark Kent. And that became, you know, a big, like, because some writers have gone for the Stranger in a Strange Land approach where he's Superman disguised as Clark Kent. But this is trying to take the other tact. This is trying to present him as having that private life that's so important to him. And I do think that was a necessary renovation for the character for that era.
He's ruminating at the beginning of this issue about his relationship with Lois, and he says, Superman, you know, she's got a crush on Superman, not dissatisfied with that, but Superman's not real. Right. So to him, he's Clark Kent, and Superman's just the celebrity guy, you know, the Hannah Montana kind of thing, I guess. But the opposite is true. They really hit this note hard in the New 52 with Batman, where they decide, the three characters, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, decide to reveal their secret identities to each other. And, you know, they grab the lariat, and he says Clark Kent, and she says Diana of Themyscira. He says Batman.
Right. Yeah, he sees Batman as who he is.
Batman is who he is, and Bruce Wayne's the mask. And I like that. I like that it's the complete opposite.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that juxtaposition is really nice right there. So here's my thesis about what is being done with the Man of Steel mini, and in terms of what it goes on to be like the status quo for Superman, which is that I think what they're doing is that they're taking some of the strongest elements of the Superman mythos, which is actually the Superboy stuff, and infusing it into his adult life. I think that elements like the supportive family, the relationship with Lana, even stuff with like Lex Luthor and so forth, the discovery about who he is. A lot of that is as part of the unsure youth component, which had previously been handled by the Superboy point in the story. And that the perspective on maturation in society had shifted by the time we get to the 80s from the 40s. Like 22 is not expected to be like a full adult, like you are legally speaking, but like you're still growing up kind of. And I think that there is just a shift towards young Clark or young adult Clark. Like, yeah, so he's 28 at the end of this story arc. And that's not the Superman when he first shows up. That's him at the end of, all these different issues that have jumped over a couple of years. 28 is still a young guy. And so some of the maturation process that we'd associate with Superman, I think, is what they're arguing is still happening, as opposed to being something in a nebulous past that occurred. And while I love Superboy and whatnot, I don't hate the idea that, like, yeah, his parents are still around. They're eventually going to die, and eventually he's going to take on this more mature role. Like, I really love Superman as a dad who has stepped into his position of being like a full, adult, but having elements of him still growing at this point was a thing that they were trying to do, because that's a thing that readers can associate with and respond to better.
Right, exactly. That was the problem. That was the problem, as I said in the beginning. He'd grown to the point where there was no character growth you could do with him. There was no way you could challenge him. He had to bring in bigger and bigger big bads just to have a story, just to have something to put down on paper.
And it's always father knows best. Like in this scenario, it's now he can be a little bit more prone to mistakes. Like he's really smart, he's really good, but
right, he's trying. Yeah, but everybody makes mistakes, and he has to bounce back from that and take ownership of it. And you see a lot more of that here than you did in the previous iterations. But yeah, they've reached the point of just ridiculousness, and at a point where you couldn't tell a decent story. Forget about whether you like the character or not. There's no way to write it.
Certainly not ongoing. It like. That's the problem. When you get to a character who is so confident in his power of action, you can do specific stories. You could do a movie. You could do big annuals. You could.
Right. I love Kingdom Come. I thought Kingdom Come was amazing, but even there, I don't want to delve into all of that.
It's not an ongoing.
It's a one shot.
That's the thing. It's not a serial.
It's a fixed story. It's a fixed graphic novel, and. But even there, he gets a warning, and he's like, "You come here to warn me?" And because look, I'm Superman. He has an attitude about it.
I mean, here what we're doing is we're taking all the elements of Superman that had come up until that point and trying to cherry pick the best parts. And so there's this vibe of like he's not going to be quite as strong. He's going to be a little bit more like the Golden Age version, who's not quite as powerful. He's got all the identifiable powers for Superman. There's not going to be a story you can't tell aside from like freely time travel. But he can do all the big ticket stuff, but not as easily. And he doesn't have like this long career as a child superhero first, because that's a different character ultimately, and they wanted to do something different.
Which was, needless to say, a disaster for Legion of Superheroes.
Right? Yeah.
Things that were also going on at the time.
Yeah. For anyone who wants to know more about that, we talked about the Death of Superboy arc a couple episodes back, and that was rough. And that shows the limitations here, where. Byrne did not create a framework that was perfect for all incorporations of important mythos elements, but it is a good foundation. And I think compare with we looked at the George Perez Wonder Woman relaunch. And I think while that's a great book, one thing that is weird is that it's like, oh, Wonder Woman is now just out there in the DC world as a new superhero. This allows for Superman has a career. Like he's, we're seeing all the early phase of his career, but any adventure that's important to your story could have happened somewhere between the pages of this book. Somewhere, Superman did a whole bunch of stuff that's like off screen because he was doing all those adventures. And so we allow for that without it breaking the continuity of previous stuff, unless you want to do a new story, in which case you're allowed to do a new story. In terms of relaunches, I think it's really effective there. Mm-hmm. Compare that with Batman, where they didn't do fucking anything. It was just like, yeah, Batman's still doing Batman stuff, and nothing really changed, and because Batman was selling well, so who cares? Yeah. Or compare it with Hawkworld when they did the Hawkman relaunch and they waited like 3 more years. So there was like all these different Hawkman appearances between 86 and 88. And then all of a sudden, brand new Hawkman shows up and he's hanging out with Wally West. And you're like, how is this working? Nothing makes sense.
Right.
So like the Byrne arcs that follow have some issues. Like, you know, there's some infamous issues like where Superman and Big Barda might do a porno together.
I didn't think you were going to bring that up. They absolutely did a porno together.
Yeah, and there's the Metallo stuff and the Brainiac stuff and lots of weird things. And, you know, again, the Death of Superboy stuff and, like, the fucking headache that is the Matrix entity Supergirl, no matter how much I love her. like there's some weird stuff that come in the 80s and 90s from this. But in terms of trying to be just a breath of fresh air, I think what they do a really good job of being like, here is all that we want to say about Superman. And we want to have it feel fresh. And I think Byrne did a really good job in that regard.
Right. And like I said, it made it accessible to the kids of the time. You know what I mean? Kids who were even younger than I was, who, like I said, they've been reared on, or we're just getting into the X-Men, that Fantastic Four run, Alpha Flight.
Yeah.
The other stuff that he had done, the other popular things that he had done. And they wanted to tap into that for those readers. And you can always, the great thing about comic books is you can always go backwards. Like you said, you came into it sometime later than I did, but you went back and found the story. And you can go back and find the stories from the 1930s and so on. And you can, there's a wealth of material to draw on there if you're putting together a movie or a project or something. As a reader, you can just go back and enjoy those aspects of it. And, I didn't realize, like you were saying before about where they introduced the idea that Lois is an army brat. I don't know where that came from the first time. I can't pin that down in my memory at all.
We're going to have to track that one down because that's the thing that I really love about Lois.
After this, I'm going to Google that just so I can sleep tonight. It's the first time that they mentioned that her dad was a general. It's a thing they harp on in the news show too.
Hey folks, Matt jumping in with an editor's note. So it turns out that this is actually the first point where Sam Lane was established as an army general. Pre-crisis, he was a horse rancher. Crazy how hard that detail stuck.
Well, I mean, like, again, there's a lot of great stuff that has come since this, but this was a nice, like, refresher where it's just like, all right, look, if you don't know shit about Superman, or you only know him from the movies, or you only know him from the reputation, because, again, DC makes more money selling Superman t-shirts than they make selling Superman comics. Like, that's, like, Superman is a brand. So maybe you know the surface details, but you don't know the specifics. This is such a good introduction for the time. You know, obviously stuff has changed since, but like,
if we came up with a story as an original story today, without all the history, what would it look like? And that's what this is.
Right.
And I think it was, you know, it was enormously influential, as you've pointed out several times. It's enormously influential, but I think at the time it was extremely popular. Whatever you think of it, you know, you go back and look at it now, and there's a different sensibility today than there was then. But I was there at the time. This was the chef's kiss, if you would.
Well, I mean, and there's a reason why when they tried to do a modern launch of a movie series for him, they called the movie Man of Steel after this comic.
Right.
I mean, sure, it's his title, but like they were deliberately trying to harken back to being like, this is our fresh start for Superman. It's not going to alienate you if you like the old stuff necessarily. Some stuff later on, like the way they handle Superboy with Legion, but
yeah, it's a little weird in there. But you know, that's the way comic books are too. They, you know, the characters are perpetually in their 20s and 30s, and they have to be perpetually in their 20s and 30s. So you get the reinvention every couple of decades. This was a really good one. Some of them are not so great. This one was all right. I loved Crisis. I thought Crisis was. When I bought the Death of Supergirl thing, I think I bought like 6 issues of it and just bagged them.
wow, that's a good
I was
issue.
sure that was
Yeah.
worth a fortune. Of course, it isn't. I have 6 extra issues of something that's not worth much, but
Yet.
yeah, if I live to be 300, I guess I can sell it.
It'll be worth so much crypto.
Yeah.
Right. I can use it to trade for Bitcoin.
Trade it for a monkey NFT. A Beppo the Super Monkey NFT.
And I was sure that it was an epic story. I was sure it was going to be important. And I wanted to have extra copies just to sell. And this led right out of that. All right, now that we've done that, what is the new story? What does the character look like again? and how do we present it so that it's accessible and enjoyable for a younger audience? And as you say, the older readers will stick with it.
Yeah.
And I think this achieved that.
Yeah, they didn't do anything crazy in terms of a redesign, like compare with New 52, where like the look is just like so much superfluous detail. This just
they did red and blue Superman, which was a disaster. You remember red and blue?
Oh, the energy effect Superman, or yeah. Those attempts are all like these big shifts that like don't look like the brand. So people coming in are like, well, what the fuck is going on? This like John Byrne has a very classic style. Like he looks like he can take any sort of like traditional superhero look and add like really nice detail that doesn't feel overly complex and at the same time overly simplistic. Like he has a very clean kind of look, and this Superman looks good.
I had an artist friend describe it as his art style is very matter of fact. I thought that was a good description. That matter of fact style, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and they brought it here, and it totally worked. At the time, this was head turning. You know what I mean? People who hadn't read DC Comics in years, oh yeah, okay, I'll come back and check this out. Like you said, they didn't do enough with Batman. The Batman thing too. Every once in a while, they'll, and I don't want to delve into a whole different thing, but they'll decide to retcon some kind of weird thing into the past or whatever with Batman. They'll do like a run of black and white episodes or whatever. It's just as much as you can say this is all over the place. This is nothing. This is a stroll in the park next to what they do with the Batman universe. It's just a disaster area.
And that impulse has always existed for Batman, which is one of the weird parts where like back in like the 70s, they were like, oh yeah, he was trained how to box by Wildcat. And it's like, but Wildcat's not from that Earth. So how did that work?
What are you talking about?
Comics are weird.
Yeah.
And Batman thrives on having it not be that weird. Superman loves weird. And so like, I'm here for all the weirdness that they introduced with this era. Sure, I could have used some of the weirdness that they cut out. You know, I think there are a few areas where they threw out the baby with the bathwater. Kara Zor-El, for example. Like, I think that moving away from having other Kryptonians was a mistake. And even though I love the Matrix entity Supergirl, I had to give it to Dan Didio being like, we should bring her back. But in terms of like needing, like trying to figure out a fresh start for a character who had been around at this point for 50 years, like.
Right, exactly. And gone completely stale.
Yeah. I think this worked really well.
It did. Absolutely. For its time, totally groundbreaking.
Jmike, so this was your first time looking at it. What are your takeaways? Like what?
Well, I mean, it's cool. It's a cool reference point to see where like a lot of the modern stuff gets all of its lore from, because you've got like the Man of Steel, Zack Snyder stuff. You've got like a lot of the stuff that bled over into like the TV shows and things, and it's kind of a cool reference point. It's like, oh, okay, this is where it comes from. Like, this is kind of cool. I had never read this before because, like I said earlier, this came out 86. I was born in 88. So this was like, I read it like a week and a half ago, and this was like my first time like, oh, okay, this is cool. No tornadoes. Kind of disappointed. It was kind of cool to see Lois Lane be a badass and like straight up take over or end a hostage situation almost by herself. But
kick a terrorist in the balls, steal a Zuzi.
Yeah. So this is really good. This is a really good jumping point. It was good to see like the red hair Lex too. It's really fun.
Yeah, and by the time we get to Superman #1, like when the monthly comics start right after this, he's totally bald. So we're going to talk more about the Byrne era of Superman soon, but right now we are probably going to take a break from the hardcore Superman comics because we've been jumping around for a lot of runs recently. So I'm not sure what we're talking about next time because we haven't recorded it yet, unlike the last couple episodes where we've been way ahead on recording. But Frank, thank you for suggesting talking about this one. We have been meaning to talk about John Byrne's Superman stuff since the beginning. Like when we first made the show and like I mocked up the artwork for the first couple episodes, I was like, yeah, we're going to talk about John Byrne in like the first 10 episodes. And it's episode 88. This is our first time delving into that era, unless you count the death of Superboy, which was part of us talking about the Legion of Superheroes.
This is a whole thing.
Yeah,
that's his own thing.
Listen, it was a real pleasure to do this with you guys. It's nice that you know a little bit about Superman and can appreciate the art of my time. But yeah, I had a real blast. I hope we can do it again some point.
Yeah, man. So Frank, if people want to find you, follow you, give your plugs. Although one of those plugs is a plug that I'm going to give as well. Go for it.
Well, the only project I got going on right now is Farragut Films. Farragut Forward, the reboot, or I don't know what to call it. We're continuing the story in the movie era. So Wrath of Khan era. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. It's FJH2112. As Kay said, also a professional actor. You can find me on IMDb. Find my wife on IMDb. We don't have any projects right now because of COVID. We're kind of laying low, regrouping, and working on things that we can use when this eventually gets out of the way. For instance, I live in Central Jersey. They're talking about a Netflix studio like 30 minutes from my house. Now, that won't happen for like 2 years, but we want to be ready when it does. We're SAG-AFTRA, proud of that, paid our dues up and stuff all this time. So we're going to be looking to get back into that pretty heavily when the time comes. And in the meantime, we're doing stuff like this. We're using the internet to talk about things that we've loved for a long time that other people are just discovering.
It's not my fault. It's not my fault.
Listen, it's not a fault at all. The fact that you're interested at all is speaks well for your character, because so many people are just totally indifferent. But yeah, so I'm easy enough to find, and those are some of the things that we're working on and getting ready to do going forward. Farragut Films will be the first foray back, but we don't shoot our scenes until late summer, if then, depending on the COVID and what variants are out.
Yeah.
How secure things
and
are.
Also that we get funding, because everyone needs to go to our Indiegogo right now, because when this drops, we're going to be towards the end of the Indiegogo, but like still in it. So go check out the Indiegogo for Farragut Forward and chip in some money, because yeah, we want to have all these adventures in the movie era timeline. I'm production manager. Frank has been a longtime cast member. We're doing all the stuff for it. We want to make the best thing possible. You can check out our preview of what it's going to look like, our 3-minute prologue. So check that out. But yeah, look up Farragut Forward on Indiegogo, or check us out on Twitter, Farragut1921.
And also watch the old episodes. They're available on YouTube. They're free.
Oh yeah.
And they're terrific. They're terrific. Know the history, know the characters. The story continues. We stopped for like 5 years, and now we're coming back.
You can see Frank being an amazing science officer. Well, and our the usual ones we recommend are check out The Price of Anything and check out The Crossing, or like the two that are like, oh yeah, fucking check out those ones. Those are like really great. Like they're all fun.
I appreciate that. The Price of Anything so far is my favorite, obviously.
Price of Anything is amazing, and Frank, you're kind of the star of that episode. So
John is always the star. Okay, the captain is always the star, but I play the captain's dad, which is no small potatoes. And I'm going to be, I do a kind of a Morgan Woodward thing where I come back, the same actor comes back with a shave. He's a totally different character.
Yeah.
He's Simon Pegg, and then he's Captain Tracy, because it's Star Trek in the 60s, and there's only like a dozen actors in Hollywood.
Yeah, it's very Star Trek.
Very Star Trek. So I'm going to be coming back as Foster in the Wrath of Khan era. We're really looking forward to it.
Jmike, if people want to find you, where can they find you, follow you?
Well, I'm not as popular as you guys, but I am just on Twitter at Jmike101. I try to respond to things that people send me, especially Case, because he does a lot. But respond, funny jokes, and memes. That's me.
We need that Greek chorus, who's responding appropriately with the right GIF at the right moment. So find and follow Jmike. As for me, you can find me at Case Aiken on Twitter. You can find the show at Men of Steel Pod. You can find more episodes of this show and tons of other great shows at certainpov.com, like Screen Snark, which is one of the first shows that we brought onto the network when we first started having shows that weren't just Jmike, me, Ben, and Addie doing stuff. Screen Snark's a wonderful casual conversation about media and how it influences your experience in the day-to-day world. So check that out. Our editor Matt is one of the co-hosts for that, along with Rachel Quirky Shank. It's a great show. Check that out. Check out certainpov.com for more stuff. Check out a link to our Discord server where you can interact with us directly. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. But until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon.
I was telling case before. I broke out my originals back in the day.
Oh, you got the originals. Oh, man.
And I read through them, to prepare.
And those are the originals because there were multiple printings because it was a really popular comic.
This one, I think the first one, they actually did an article in the New York Times that had a dual cover on this. So this was the very beginning of that horrible trend of, you need the alternate cover and you have to get 10 versions of it to just break even, which is despicable. And
I've got the second printing, the close-up of him opening his shirt cover.
Is that what it was? I don't remember.
Yeah, that's the alternate cover, but it was the second printing because I was like, I've got Man of Steel #1. Like, let me take this somewhere and see what it. Oh, it's worth 75 cents. Okay, well, I only paid 50 cents for it. I'm feeling good.
Right. Gotta open it up and read the fine print. Second print.
Right. Hey, all you amazing sentient beings. This is Case Aiken from Certain POV, and outside of podcasting, I work with a group that does Star Trek fan films called Starship Farragut. For 15 years, we've been doing material inspired by the original Star Trek series, but now we're moving on to the movie era with our latest production, Farragut Forward. And that means new sets, new props, and we're gonna have to make those monster maroon uniforms. So we have a crowdfunder running right now. Backers can get access to our soundtracks, have their names show up on screen as part of a duty roster, or even get a walk-on role. Our hope is that this is just the beginning, and that the assets we create with the money we raise will go towards future productions, including possibly a sequel that may just be written by a certain scruffy, nerf-hurting Man of Steel who'll take another pass at it. Wink, wink. To back the production, go to Indiegogo and look up Farragut Forward, or find us on Twitter at Farragut1921. And hey, while you're at it, check out the 3-minute prologue we put together to show what we can do. But in the meantime, live long and prosper.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not.
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
She will be mine. Aurora.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.